Hello, and welcome to the session, Professionalism Surrounding AI and Emerging Technologies. I'm Mary Pat Campbell, and actually, we're going to wait for a couple minutes because I just started this recording. Hi, I'm a recording. And I'm going to cycle between the first two slides of this presentation as we wait for people to come into the session. I'd like to thank the sponsors of the Actuarial Technology Summit. Here they are. And a reminder that this session is only reflecting my views and opinions. It's not reflecting the views or positions of my employer, or I should say employers, the Full Stack Actuarial, the conference sponsors, or any other entity that I may be associated with or they may be associated with. It's just me. Again, as people are coming into this session, this is Professionalism Surrounding AI and Emerging Technologies. I know it's the end of the year. People may need a professionalism continuing education credit. I think this will probably satisfy it if you are in one of the U.S. organizations and maybe one of the non-U.S. organizations. I don't know the requirements there, so I'm sorry. You're responsible for knowing your own continuing education requirements. Maybe read those and maybe you'll get a credit out of that. Once again, I'm just pausing for a little time in this recording, in case there's some technical difficulties or as people are filtering into the session. And I want to thank the sponsors for the Actuarial Technology Summit. Here they are again, the Standard, Oliver Wyman, the Gunter Group, and Data IQ. Thank you guys. And here is the last time I'm going to be showing this title slide. So once again, this is Professionalism Surrounding AI and Emerging Technologies. I'm Mary Pat Campbell. I'm a fellow of the Society of Actuaries and a member of the American Academy of Actuaries. And, we've been seeing all of these different great technologies people have been demonstrating today. Here I'm doing warning, but also let's take advantage of these technologies while maintaining our professionalism and seeing what kind of guidance already exists in our codes and our standards of practice that exist. But first, let's see what AI thinks about me. So this is just from one of the many AI tools that's out there. This is Grok 2 Mini, which is on X, which used to be known as Twitter. And I asked Grok 2 Mini, draw a pic of me based on my post. Boom! Nailed it, don't you think? And below you actually see the text that Grok 2 Mini used to generate the image. So everything that's in that paragraph I had been talking about in the week prior to asking for this picture, by the way. So it's actually all relevant information. How well that picture captures me. So this is an example of what is known as AI slop. But you may want to know, okay, what does this have to do with AI and professionalism? And I'm about to give you a better example. But more specifically, why me? Why am I doing this presentation? Well, a lot of people do need professionalism credits at the end of the year, so you're welcome. But also, I've had a long interest in best standards surrounding technology use since I entered, well, actually, before becoming an actuary, but let's not go into the long past. But coming in at the beginning of my actuarial career, a lot of my interest surrounded spreadsheet risk, and it's still a big interest in some of the examples that I will be bringing up in this presentation actually will have to do with spreadsheets, and I will explain why in a bit. But most of the examples, actually none of the examples involved in here involve actuaries because we've got standards. No, but we do make mistakes. We don't want to be fearful of using the technology. We want to play with these toys and we want to incorporate it into our work product. However, we want to maintain the high standards that we have as actuaries, and we don't want to end up like this next example I'm about to show you. So I grabbed this tweet or post or whatever you want to call it. Yes, and I use a lot of these things off of Twitter/X because people do stupid things there and show off their lack of thought quite often. In this case, Ana Navarro is someone who is a TV host known for her work on The View and I believe CNN. The focus here is that people were using tools such as ChatGPT unthinkingly and thereby showed their lack of standards. In this case, the argument had to do with Joe Biden pardoning his son, Hunter Biden. And people were trying to come up with other examples of close relatives being pardoned by presidents. One of these things is not like the other, so there are 3 examples being given here of 3 presidents pardoning relatives or in-laws. 2 of them are real, 1 of them is not, and I'll just tell you, it's the first example, Woodrow Wilson pardoning his brother-in-law, Hunter DeButts. People pushed back when she did this, and you can see there's what's called a community note on this post. There is no evidence that Woodrow Wilson had a brother-in-law named Hunter DeButts. While at least one person by that name was living during his presidency, there is nothing to suggest any relation or that they were pardoned. Only only result is this tweet. When Ana Navarro was told that, by the way, you're kind of wrong about these pardons, Bill Clinton did pardon Roger Clinton, and Donald Trump did pardon Charles Kushner. That's not what was at question. She showed the screenshot of her result from ChatGPT, which is where she had gotten this information. She said, "Hey, Twitter sleuths, thanks for taking the time to provide context. Take it up with ChatGPT." And people pointed out that ChatGPT and other LLMs, which are large language models, are prone to hallucinating. And this is something with regards to professionalism in using AI and other emerging technologies is you need to know the weaknesses of the models you're using so that you know how errors can slip into work product, and so you don't have embarrassing errors like the concept is, what do we do when we have new technologies that we're incorporating into our work stream? And it doesn't matter if it's AI or if it's predictive analytics or other data tools. It can be actually physical technology like wearables. It can be just going back to old technology, old to us, like spreadsheets. It can be new kinds of theoretical models that we're incorporating into our work. We always go back to our high-level principles because we actuaries are better than everybody else. Okay, this is not exactly true, but we do hold ourselves to high standards, and anybody can follow the standards. The ones that I'm going to point out today are not specific to actuaries. The main difference, though, is if we don't follow them, there are consequences because we have discipline that can yank our credentials. Back to the basics, back to the core, which is the U.S. Actuarial Code of Professional Conduct. This applies to the actuarial members because some of these organizations are not purely actuarial. Of the American Academy of Actuaries, American Society of Pension Professionals and Actuaries, so some of those are not actuaries, Casualty Actuarial Society, the Conference of Consulting Actuaries, and the Society of Actuaries. Now, notice that this U.S. the Code of Professional Conduct, now I said U.S. Actuarial Code of Professional Conduct, the Code of Professional Conduct applies to all members of these organizations, whether or not you are a U.S. member. By the way, it just so happens these 5 organizations are based in the U.S. That's it. But this Code of Professional Conduct is going to apply to you if you are a member of these. So I'm a fellow of the Society of Actuaries, so I'm a member of the SOA, and I'm a member of the American Academy of Actuaries. So through 2 of these organizations, the Code of Professional Conduct applies to me. So let's start at the very beginning, a very good place to start, Precept 1, which has to do with integrity, professional integrity, let's be clear. This is a direct quote, An actuary with a capital A is defined in the document. Not going to get through that. An actuary shall act honestly, with integrity and competence, which I highlighted that, and in a manner to fulfill the profession's responsibility to the public and to uphold the reputation of the actuarial profession. Anyone who has read the Code of Conduct, and by the way, this is one way to get professionalism credits under certain standards. You can read this code and think about it. That's actually one of the ways I do every year is I read this and read relevant ASOPs to my work. It has annotations on many of these. I'm only going to address 2 of the annotations on precept 1, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. But 1-1 has to do with applying things with skill and care, or in my paraphrase or restatement, don't be sloppy in your work. We are holding ourselves to a high standard of our work product. I'm going to be showing an example of someone who was being sloppy in a moment. And then 1-4, no fraud, dishonesty, deceit, misrepresentation, etc. And don't make the rest of the profession look bad. There is the notorious, and I'm not going to name the guy, you can look it up yourself, it's called actuarial work voodoo, and a huge brouhaha. This had nothing to do with AI, by the way. Basically saying, yeah, we can just make up whatever the heck we want. Yeah, that's not going to make the actuarial profession look very good. Now, is it? So here comes one of my examples. Again, not an actuary. This is an expert witness in a case. Deepfake technology used to influence an election. So the concept is this: a law was passed in Minnesota. There is a lawsuit against this law on First Amendment grounds. The people who are suing against the law, that's the Coles part. They are suing against the Attorney General of the state of Minnesota. That's the Ellison part. Jeff Hancock is called as an expert witness for the state, so that's on the Ellison side. He has put himself forth. He's a professor at Stanford University as a disinformation expert. The information that he's putting forward, he has a declaration, 12 pages, and I put the link here, and there were exhibits which included citations that were in his declaration. The opposing counsel was trying to put together a response to this expert witness declaration and trying to get this expert witness excluded from testimony. And of course, like all good things nowadays, it went down on Twitter/X. Frank Bednarz is the guy who is the opposing counsel, or one of the opposing lawyers. His report claims one study found that even when individuals are informed about the existence of deep fakes, so like using AI or other technology to put, say, Trump's head on somebody else and there's a video, they may still struggle to distinguish between real and manipulated content. So that's in quotes from the declaration. I guess the struggle is real because this study does not exist. So this is Exhibit C. This is from the citations, and this is the Huang J, Zhang X, and Wang Y 2023, The Influence of Deepfake Videos on Political Attitudes and Behavior, Journal of Information Technology and Politics, blah, blah, blah. And it has a DOI.org link, and if you know academia of what DOI links are, there's no content with the title existing online. The journal does exist so if you go to that journal, that volume, those pages, there's something there, but it's not that article. The authors seem to be in an uncanny valley of academics who publish about deepfakes. So it's a hallucinated citation. And also got another lawyer involved, Eugene Volokh from the Volokh Conspiracy, who publishes on the libertarian website Reason. Volokh found a second hallucinated citation in this citation list that was submitted under this lawsuit to the court under penalty of perjury. Lawyer Frank Bednarz was submitting a filing basically saying, you cannot trust this expert witness. He filed a false report, essentially. He wanted to exclude the expert. The expert witness had to file a pretty embarrassing response saying that, yeah, those two citations were incorrect. Here are the two correct citations, and he did actually have correct citation for the points he wanted to make, because he really is misinformation, disinformation expert, and he has a lot of citations. But he had used ChatGPT to put his report together and to put his citation list together. But he also did not document how he created it. If you actually read this, and I'm not going to read this, he only made a report of what may have happened, of how he created this document. And you're like, you're not sure. You don't have a record. So once the admission came officially into record that he had used ChatGPT to actually help compose the report, the opposing counsel continued on. The motion to exclude the testimony was that he obviously used ChatGPT. ChatGPT is not an expert. Even if this is on about AI-generated deepfakes, this was November 27th, 2024. We'll see where this case goes. There's an explicit policy from the Society of Actuaries. They actually have an explicit policy with regards to AI-generated content. Authors are required to take responsibility for all AI-generated content. AI-based tools and technologies, including but not limited to large language models, LLMs, generative AI, and chatbots, for example, ChatGPT, cannot be listed as an author. Authors are required to acknowledge where AI tools are used, document the AI-generated content accordingly, and continue to sign Society of Actuaries publishing agreements. So precept 2, moving on, has to do with actuarial qualification standards. And I don't have it on this slide, but I will read it out off my phone. An actuary shall perform actuarial services only when the actuary is qualified to do so on the basis of basic and continuing education, and experience, and only when the actuary satisfies applicable qualification standards. When we talk about emerging areas and say AI and new technologies, are you qualified to use the new technology and knowledgeable enough about its capabilities and limitations when you're using it as part of providing your actuarial services? And I'm going to get into annotation 2-2 in a moment, but often we talk about this look into the mirror test. This is giving me an excuse to break up all this text with a little bit of pictures here. I like taking selfies in museums, and this is all in the same museum, the Wadsworth Atheneum, which is in Hartford, Connecticut. When we talk about look in the mirror test with regards to, are you qualified? Because it's not a bright line. Yes, there's necessary qualifications, you have your credentials, and there are certain qualifications, for example, being able to sign off the official statement of actuarial opinion on an annual statement, for example. That said, there's all sorts of actuarial services out there, and especially when we're talking about emerging areas of actuarial practice. Which mirror are you looking into? And so these are a variety of mirrors. The first one, where you see the back of my head, that's a mirror intended for use on a boat, on a yacht. Then we have something that's a mirror darkly, so a kind of old mirror, doesn't reflect all that well. And then another one that's actually an art piece. So the first two were intended as working mirrors. The third is as an art piece. And they all reflect to different extents. And when we're on the edge of developing work, what do you do? And some of the examples I'm going to be showing you where people flub with regards to technology, some of the technology flubs are of very old technology in working with our services. Aren't we qualified? The argument I'm going to make, and yes, this is from the Wadsworth as well, when we're working with something that is kind of new and cutting edge, usually we need to look at it from a variety of angles. And I'm kind of stretching this mirror metaphor a bit wide, but if we're working on, say, setting reserves of a line of business that's well established and has well-established methods. This is something that we can do a comparison, because I've done this in my past as well, and this was before I was credentialed. I worked at TIAA, and I was supervised by actuaries, of course, who were qualified. I was working with what was being developed for principles-based approaches for reserves and capital, and I was actually doing a lot of, say, Monte Carlo modeling. I had a background from academia and modeling neurons, but I made a lot of mistakes in doing my models and having the qualified actuaries who were used to what kind of order magnitude results one should be seeing from a variety of scenarios helped keep me, put up some guardrails of what I was doing. So that's one kind of perspective. Also, having non-actuarial experts help you with regards to use of the technology is also helpful, and knowing the limitations of the models will really help you in being able to detect when things may be going awry, and also when things are going right. You kind of need to know when things are going well as well. So again, annotation 2-2, the absence of applicable standards for a particular type of assignment does not relieve the actuary of the responsibility to perform such actuarial services only when qualified to do so. So just because they have not promulgated an ASOP, Actuarial Standard of Practice, or there have not been regulations put forth, etc., does not mean it's Wild West time and you can do whatever the hell you want. If you're putting on your professional hat as an actuary, you cannot just do any old thing and just put out sloppy work, and just because, there's no rules and no boundaries. That's not how professionalism works. That said, there are actuarial standards. So precept 3, an actuary shall ensure that actuarial services performed by or under the direction of the actuary satisfy applicable standards of practice. And I'll be getting to that in a moment with regards to U.S. actuarial standards of practice. Don't assume because it's a new technology, it's not already covered by an ASOP. We'll see that ASOPs are actually pretty broad. ASOP 56 on modeling actually covers a lot of what we see that's being developed right now. But precept 4, communications and disclosures, covers all of us who are members of the CAS and SOA. An actuary who issues an actuarial communication shall take appropriate steps to ensure that the actuarial communication is clear and appropriate to the circumstances and its intended audience and satisfies applicable standards of practice. So you may not be US based and operating there, so ASOP 41 may not apply to you. However, you may be in a jurisdiction that has other actuarial standards of practice, and precept 4 applies to you if you're a member of CAS or SOA or the other 3 organizations that are based in the US and are signatories to this code of conduct. How does this apply when you're using AI tools or maybe other technology? Have you disclosed the extent of your use and reliance on AI tools? Now, I do not mention I'm using Microsoft Copilot to help edit my reports, because I'm not using it to generate the content of my reports. I'm using it to, say, edit down an overly long paragraph. It has the same content, and I shorten it up. And then I am reviewing it, and I'm taking responsibility for it. So not generating anything. And have you complied with requirements for communication and control of your work product? One of the things that you need to think about as well, are you copy pasting your entire report or something, some of your work product, into, say, ChatGPT or something else? What's happening here is any of that getting incorporated into these AI tools training sets? Because there may be issues with confidentiality. This is control of work product. Because that's the last precept I want to talk about, which is precept 9. I'm not talking about, you might have thought 1, 2, 3, 4. I was going to talk about all 4. No, I'm not talking about all the precepts in the Code of Conduct. Not all of these are necessarily relevant about what I want to hit. Precept 9 is on confidentiality. An actuary shall not disclose to another party any confidential information unless authorized to do so by the principal or required to do so by law. My company and I should say has and is developing its policies around these tools. And obviously, confidentiality of our clients' information is really important to us. So we lock that stuff down and make sure that none of that confidential information gets copy pasted into, say, ChatGPT. That's not cool. So I've been threatening to do this. We're moving on from precepts and getting now into specific applications, which is the Actuarial Standards of Practice. And these are the US specific ASOPs. These can be more broadly applicable. You don't have to be US based to follow them. You have to follow them if you are a US based actuary that you're practicing in the US. This is just a clip from a 2-issue Batman comic featuring the famous, of course, infamous Batman villain, the Actuary. That's this person here who's behind that the Penguin is pointing the gun at. He failed, unsurprisingly. This is what happens if you don't follow the ASOP. So the top 3 ASOPs, in my opinion, ASOP 41, Actuarial Communications. That always applies because, hey, you got to communicate your results somehow, and I'll have more to say about that. ASOP 23, Data Quality, because we're always working with data, of course, and ASOP 56, which is actually relatively new, and it's modeling, and a lot of things are models. And now we have to incorporate these AI models, and it doesn't matter if we created the models or not, we're using models. All types of actuarial work involve these 3 ASOPs, I would argue. And I will be circling back to this at the end of the presentation. Each of these ASOPs, and if you've never read one, I'm just going to stare at you for a moment. If you're a credentialed actuary, you really need to read the ASOPs. They are short, they're very high level, and they provide you with checklists of what you should be doing in your work. So ASOP 23, which is on data quality, and what is really nice is they really provide you with a checklist of what you should be doing in ASOP 23 data quality. It gives you a checklist of data selection of data, and I'll just go through these. Selection of data, so what data do I need to be using for this project? Review of data. This is not an audit of data, by the way. You don't have to thoroughly, check everything is okay, but you are checking for reasonability. You're checking to see if there's any really blatant anomalies, and this is often what comes up. Use of data. Okay, how are we using it? Is it appropriate for use that I'm trying to do? 3.5, this is important. And this is important for the AI specifically. Reliance on data supplied by others. And this is, you could say, oh, it's supplied by ChatGPT. And hundreds of butts. That's data, right? And you're going to have to disclose and communicate that, of course. But how reliable is it, and should you rely on it? And is this really a source you should be using? Reliance on other information relevant to the use of data. And this can be related to, say, data dictionaries and information about how the data was created. Again, this goes back to, say, Gen AI. One of the things that you might want to think about, and this gave me pause when I found out that Reddit, Reddit, if you're not familiar kind of with that whole discussion website, was being used as a big corpus of text to train ChatGPT. And that explains why you get certain kinds of jokey responses from Chat. Certain things may be unreliable because of the training sets that went into your Gen AI. Because if you're using Gen AI, say, to write fiction, maybe it's okay. But if you're trying to use it for more serious uses, perhaps the general LLMs, large language models, are not what you should be using, but something that's a little more specifically trained for what you need. And then 3.7 mentioned confidentiality. Again, you have to think about confidential aspects of your data. Gives you a checklist. And I've run into the problem with 3.7 before. A lot of us work with sensitive data. And we have to think about how do we safeguard the data we work with. Similarly, ASOP 56 on modeling, the section 3.6 on model risk. So I'm actually going down another level with using, say, AI models, but also predictive analytic models, machine learning processes and algorithms. Model risk is, I would say, our pain point. Because this is where we put in our controls and our checks, model testing, output validation, review by another professionals, and I think getting more people involved and more non-actuaries involved probably is a good idea as we're developing these, and I think a lot of people are, of course. Reasonable governance and controls, because there's a lot of model rot in these kinds of systems, and then mitigating misuse and misinterpretation. And we really need to be sensitive about that, as regulators are potentially reactive to some of the uses that we're using these models for. Actuarial document. An actuarial communication in any recorded form, such as paper, email, spreadsheets can be an actuarial document, presentations, hi, I'm a video, audio or video recordings, hello, this is an actuarial communication coming at you, websites, and court or hearing transcripts. Notes taken by someone other than the actuary are not considered actuarial documents. So, hello, welcome to my actuarial document. Okay, so form and content need to be appropriate for circumstances and intended users. All of these are coming out of ASOP 41, by the way. I'm just extracting some of the information in bullet point form or outline form. You want clarity for your audience. It needs to be at an appropriate time, reasonable time period for the intended users. And note, it's for the intended users. So I have an intended audience for this actuarial document and identified responsible actuary. Hi, I'm Mary Pat Campbell, the responsible actuary for this actuarial document. The disclosures are their reliance on other sources for data, and you'll notice, boop, there is a link at the bottom of the slide. ASOP 23 data quality is also referred to here if you need more support. Responsibility for assumptions and methods and information date of the report. So it's December 2024. I'm not going to get more specific than that because I've recorded this over a number of days. Now, this slide I actually created from a contingency article that came from a recent document from an Academy work group, Actuarial Professionalism Considerations for Generative AI, Evaluating and Validating AI Models. I have a link to that article, and at the end of these slides, and again, I'll provide the slides for download, there is the longer document in PDF. And it's mainly a series of questions and considerations for using Gen AI. But I wanted to highlight these specific things because, as you notice, I focus on what can go wrong. Lack of control, errors, model drift. I said model rot, but model drift. Validation techniques. Do you know how to validate what's coming out of these models? And that's qualitative and quantitative. Like, we don't want to use quantitative stuff, but there is some hybrid models coming out that people are putting together, not ChatGPT, but some more specific models people are building. Opacity, I mean, these are very black box models, but even the people who are creating these deep learning models they can't really explain many times how it goes from the training set to the output that you're seeing. And what I say, what it doesn't know, so what is outside, this is like what it's mapping. So you've got your training set, so they could tell you what the world of the training data are. And so you might be able to kind of understand what is excluded from that set. But even so, you don't know what it doesn't know to a certain extent. So what can you do to use these models? And I'm saying, put in some checks and controls. I'm not saying don't use the models at all. You do need to learn about how they can go wrong. As I said, errors, model drift, and stuff. But you do need to put in a process. And in this case, I got this diagram from a presentation from 2021. This had to do with model validation about different levels of rigor. And you can kind of see these were for specific, a body of, I think it was health models, actually, health insurance models of different parts in the process for input to the calculation engine to the output validation. And how you might have it for different products and different levels of sensitivity. And you can try to do the same kind of thing. Part of the problem, of course, with some of these AI models is that, and this is part of your validation process, you could probably put in the same prompts and you won't get the same results out. And that's part of the issue with these kinds of models. So you may not want to rely on what is coming out to a large extent. So what I'm going to do, and I'm going to use some examples actually from Excel related disasters, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. And the reason why, of course, this is a technology that's been around for 40 years now, but part of it is that for quantitative problems, and I'm going to give you some, ChatGPT related disasters, don't worry, but they're not going to be quantitative. That said, we're getting Copilot incorporated in Excel now. So just wait, we'll get some Copilot errors in time. So just really quickly, here's data. So let's think ASOP 23. This was back in 2020. And you have to think about what makes the news, because I know there's a lot of model problems going on right now. And I'm going to leave some stuff that I know about to the Q&A discussion session that's going to be live. So I'll have stuff in my back pocket. That said, what happened was data files were being reported in the UK to their central health authority or whatever that they were reporting to. And they were losing cases because they were uploading the data files into the .xls format, which had basically size limits. And because of those size limits, and that the test files were originally like in CSV format, they were losing data. So this is a case of know your data. We're going to see this with AI, that the other problem is happening, that people are incorporating output as their data into reports that should not be making it in there, versus here you're losing data. There's another case with Excel. And so we should know this. This is still going on, by the way. None of this is actuaries, of course. This never happens to you, right? That Excel is changing. And this is, again, stuff coming from CSV, that's comma separated value file format. When it gets imported into Excel, getting changed into dates. And this is because of the default setting. You can actually change the default setting now. This happened just last month, November 2024. This was a simple copy-paste problem, manual. And this came from Australia, I believe, where Web Travel, the company, was having an issue. They had to restate their financials, and there was, I'm not going to get into the numbers of what the restatement was, but this was, of course, at a very critical point. But I highlighted, it finally discovered the issue, and by it, they mean Web Travel. Deloitte was using the wrong numbers. Its auditors had copied and pasted the wrong sales to work out the adjustments. So these were adjustments that had been agreed upon, by the way. A simple yet substantial spreadsheet error. Well, it was a human error. The humans put the wrong numbers as input into the spreadsheet, and the wrong numbers came out. Now I'm going to way old. This goes back to the Babylonians. Plimpton 322. We call it a spreadsheet because it's like in a matrix format and people are doing calculations. And most of the calculations on this tablet are correct, but people found 6 errors on here. And I just copied from my sources here one error because it was the easiest for me to understand what had happened, that one of the numbers was copied incorrectly. That's so easy to understand. This is obviously done manually, poking in the clay, but there were more difficult errors. One was like the result given was twice what it should have been. The London whale disaster, again, you may remember this. This was from, I believe, 2012. They blamed it on a spreadsheet. It's much more complicated than a spreadsheet error, by the way. It was lax governance of a trading desk because it had been very profitable. So they did not put good controls on this desk while it was being profitable. But anything that could be greatly profitable can be greatly in creating losses as well, which is what occurred. And then in the post-mortem, they looked at how it was supposedly being controlled, and the risk metric being used was miscalculated by a factor of 2. $6 billion in losses. I think we're a lot more skeptical in using these Gen AI tools. We wouldn't give them so much control because we know we don't understand what they're doing exactly. So we wouldn't give them decision-making power. They don't have responsibility like we do. So those were the quantitative issues. And again, pretty much all of those came from news reports on Excel being involved in screw-ups. And as you can see, it was all human-generated screw-ups. Excel was just an innocent bystander. Here, I'm going to have some issues with regards to Gen AI, and these are all going to be academic papers. So here are some academic papers on the right where you see some phrases are highlighted, where you see regenerate response, regenerate response. Please note that as an AI language model, I am unable to generate specific tables or conduct tests, so the actual results should be included in the table. So what was happening here, and I actually went and looked, and these are from specific researchers who are looking for these phrases in academic papers. Specifically, Guillaume Cabanac is a very specific person who is searching for these. The original people are probably non-native speakers and specifically writers of English in some of the cases, who are translating their original work into English so they can get published in mainstream academic journals. And they were just copy-pasting from the ChatGPT interface, and there was no editing. These journals are supposed to be peer-reviewed and have editors. And obviously, nobody edited these. So a bunch of people look bad. But another thing you notice with the table, most of these papers are being typeset in a language called LaTeX, and it's a pain in the butt to code these. But it can also help if you ask ChatGPT, can you, give me the LaTeX code for this? But it could also be bad at that. But you can see there's some non-paired parentheses in the lower 2 formulas, and so the corrected formulas did get printed. And it seems to me that it's okay to use ChatGPT for the purposes of building tables and building code for, say, LaTeX or some of these other purposes. So there is a blog I love to read called Retraction Watch, and they are looking for a variety of they're looking for fraud, they're looking for plagiarism, but they also have a page on looking for AI-generated papers. Some of the features that they look for, that regenerate response phrase, as an AI language model, and it's usually at the beginning of a text block, or certainly here is, which is also a response you often get. But those are fine, you just need to edit. But then there's the dishonest use of ChatGPT, such as tortured phrases, and I linked to the paper, such as using counterfeit consciousness in place of artificial intelligence to try to avoid plagiarism detection. So what they do is they go through and ask ChatGPT to rewrite somebody else's paper, and you submit it as if it were your own. And this is one of my favorite things. So a lot of people are using these, and I think it's a great thing of using ChatGPT and these other things for access to journals because they don't speak English well. So let me translate, and it's a better translator than what was there before. Translate my work into English so I can submit. The problem is ChatGPT tends to be verbose and it tends to like certain words. And one of the words it likes more than like normal English speakers is the word delve. And this is a graph showing like the normal frequency versus so the frequency of the word in 2024 versus its usage in 2022 when people weren't using ChatGPT so much, and you can see that the word delving is used a lot more. Delves particularly, but you can see delve is there and delving as well, are kind of out of whack with their usage in 2022. And then there's some other ones that show up like underscores showcasing steatotic. I looked that one up. That has to do with fatty liver disease. That has to do with fatty. So that's kind of odd, but maybe that's a specific researcher in fatty liver disease who got a lot more papers published. Heck if I know. Additionally, notably, so you can see there's some adverbial phrases that are showing up. But to close out, going back to the ASOPs, they provide high-level checklists that you can apply to the AI software in your usage. It's important if it's a core part of your process to disclose it to everyone who's involved, especially, and it's get it out in front, because if it causes a problem, it's better to have let people know that it was used, when it was used, keep track of the prompts you used or how you used it, because this is part of the learning process as well. And then if something went wrong, okay, people will know how it went wrong. It'll be less embarrassing than that case with the expert witness where he can't even say, well, I think this is probably what happened. Well, can he even say what the prompts actually were? AI and software cannot be responsible. Humans are responsible. Humans are the ones who can blame. When they say spreadsheet error, no, almost rarely is it the software or the spreadsheets that screwed up. It's a human being who screwed up. So take responsibility, put your name on stuff, document it. Use the ASOPs, they're your friends. And it gets you, make checklists. It gets you in the habit of doing your job and doing it well. And if you screw up, you can go back to that checklist, find out where it went wrong, and then you can fix it. If you didn't write it down, then you don't know where it went wrong now, do you? So that has been professionalism. Mark down that. We'll go to discussion next. And I do have more examples of screw ups, so that's fun. And there are further slides that you can download that has links to a bunch more sources, a bunch more resources that you can follow and read to help beef up. And you can get some more professionalism credits from reading. So thank you. And I'll be talking with you live. And I believe this is going to live stream. Here we go. Getting everybody in here. Howdy, y'all. And let me share my screen. Share my screen. Jeez. Come on, share my screen, dang it. Zoom is not playing nice here. Whoops. You can see all the tabs I got open. Where did my PowerPoint go? Come on. There we go. Just so that people know, they're in the slide deck, and I put a Dropbox link, and in the Whova app, you should also be able to download a PDF. There's a bunch of extra slides that has a bunch of resource links. I actually drew upon one of the American Academy of Actuary papers that came out in September, Professionalism, Actuarial Professionalism Considerations for Generative AI, a professionalism discussion paper. And it says discussion. If you actually read it, it's like a lot of questions that you should be asking yourself. And I think that's appropriate because a lot of these things are in development right now, and we are having a lot of questions. I'm just going to go through this really rapidly. I have so many resources. I wanted to make sure people knew the opportunities that are out there. One of the ones that I want to point out, because I'm always trying to get people to volunteer. I've been on the Data Science and Analytics Committee at the American Academy of Actuaries. If you're a member of the Academy, so you have to be a member of the Academy to volunteer there. Sorry, you got to be a member. We've been doing a lot of stuff on this committee. I was involved in the issue paper on big data terminology, and this was to help ease newbies into this area so that we have a common language. But we've been issuing white paper after white paper on all sorts of emerging areas in data science, analytics, AI, all sorts of things. And we're always looking for new volunteers. So, consider that. Some links from CAS, they had a research paper series on race and insurance pricing, and regulators are really looking on how we're using our algorithms and third-party data, how we're doing underwriting and pricing. So, and it's going beyond P&C insurance now as well. Some people who may be involved with Colorado and in Washington, D.C., they just issued some papers. And again, there are committees at the Academy that have been looking in this, and CAS and different organizations within the US. So these are very hot topics. And I'm just, there's some research that's been going on in the SOA. Go Actuary is an online discussion forum, and some of these are some of the screw ups that I have been collecting over the years. So you can see where I got some of my examples. Actually, a lot of them were ones that I had collected from the news. And the European Spreadsheet Risks Interest Group, I have been involved with them for 15 plus years now, and we collect horror stories as well. And another thing, just an invitation. These are my links. I will connect to anybody in the actuarial world on LinkedIn. So yes, that's an open invitation. So just an FYI to everybody here. Let's see here. And yeah, and then also I have a Substack, and I do some podcasts on error and fraud sometimes, but I mainly write about mortality and pensions and public finance. So don't expect a lot of fraud kind of stuff. And I've also written about some of the actuarial standards of practice in SOA publications. So a lot of stuff if you need to get more professionalism credit by just reading, because you can do that if you're a US-based actuary. You don't need to just do sessions like this. So those are some ideas if you need them. So let me go back. I'll stop sharing. See if there's any questions. I think I use the host tool so people can no, I think, no, just wait. I think people can unmute themselves if they have a question. I think I did that right. Or not just question, but if you want to discuss anything. Any good chat GPT disasters you've seen in the news? I like the ones with the legal cases where people have submitted false cases and stuff, and the judge gets very angry when they catch them at it. I didn't really use one of those though.
I'll throw something out there. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Aaron.
Yeah, I think one thing that's been interesting for me is making some internal decisions, right? And trying to have robust discussion. Um, I've been surprised by the amount of people that have just used AI instead of actually thinking about, what their opinions are, all of their,
Oh,
our company specific like factors to consider. There's a lot of tools out there where you can just take a paragraph, throw it in it, and it'll tell you the likelihood it was generated by AI. And
right.
so I've had the experience of when that's happened, it just kind of makes me think like, does this person value like this discussion at all if they're not going to put, any effort into it? I wouldn't say it's necessarily like a professionalism thing, but I know as just a human, I'm like, I spent tons of time thinking about, this topic and you just put it in AI and basically copy pasted it leads to an interesting kind of paradigm, right?
Right. And I'm a little different and you can see I really leaned heavily on a lot of written and qualitative examples. That's because most of my job, the most actuarial work I do is my volunteer work with the Academy and SOA, because I'm primarily doing what's more like market research. And I have used ChatGPT and Copilot and those kind of tools to generate certain things, but I end up, if I do it as my first step, I always end up completely rewriting it because I
Yes.
hate the style that comes out, and it never gives me anything numerical to hang my hat on. And I have to give people something that has meat. It like almost never has meat to it.
Yep.
Yeah, you don't need an algorithm to detect this stuff, especially if you're familiar with working with me, because I definitely have a strong writing style. So it's very detectable whether it's me or not. Um, but what I usually use, so I actually use the Microsoft Copilot suite of tools. Now I'm part of the internal group. And yeah, I mean, I know we're coming up on time. But I'll tell you what I really use for my process is I usually, because I have no problem writing from all the information. I have my spreadsheets, I have all of my info and my sources. And I write stuff out. I actually took that Academy paper that they did, and I asked Copilot to create a deck. I'm not going to show you guys what it looks like right now. It was horrible. Um, I saw this hideous thing and I'm like, there is absolutely no way I can use any of this. It is the most boring thing I've ever seen. And it's an insult to the people who created the original paper. Um, it would have been better for me to like take screenshots of their original PDF and slap it on PowerPoint slides than what Copilot did. It was really bad. And that's often what has come up with the kind of AI for professional uses that I've seen. So I write content and then I use Copilot because I overwrite. I say, okay, this is 500 words. I need to get it down to 250 words. Can you help me? And it does. So that's what it's good for me is for editing stuff I've already created and to shorten it, make it a little punchier sometimes. But it's not where I need it to be for what's out there. And that's for me. And I've been talking with the developers for some of these things and saying, this is what I need and this is what I use. And some of the tools that are being trained for very specific uses, um, if you focus it on this is my target, that can improve. But the general LLMs, they're not fit for really actuarial use. you know, you can use it for certain things, but I wouldn't. It doesn't look good, in my opinion. But if you're a procrastinator and you're not great at writing, for example, and this is what you need to get a kick in the pants, you can use it as part of your process. That I can see. It's easier to edit something that exists, maybe, than to start with a blank page. And I think that's how these tools may help people. If you're not great with writing, have ChatGPT start you off, and then you end up rewriting. You have to edit it though. Otherwise, you're going to end up being very embarrassed, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, I think it's the difference of having it as a co-pilot versus putting it in the pilot seat and letting it fly the plane. I've had
Yeah,
that experience, and that's what's been frustrating is people treating it as a pilot.
yeah.
Everything you mentioned, 100%. Yeah, they're
Anyway,
incredibly useful
I
tools.
don't want to cut into the next session's time. So this is us, and people can find me, Mary Pat Campbell, actuary. You Google, and that's me. So you can find me easy. Bye.